Welcome, Money Buddies. In this week's episode of Money Talk, we're talking about traveling for 6 months straight, spending $50 a day, and being intentional with our money and our life. I'm your host, Skylar Fleming, and let's get talking. I am very excited for this interview and today's Money Talk. Justin Taylor and I recorded live at FinCon in Portland, Oregon last week. It was a fantastic conversation and it was so much fun to record live in person. It's a very different process than what I'm used to, but it was so much fun, and the Money Talks at FinCon are so great. They're so much fun to meet other creators and share and bounce ideas off of each other. And if you have any interest in creating personal finance content, or you want to talk to fun money nerds, and trust me, it can be fun, you should try to make it out to FinCon next year in Palm Springs, California. But this is an episode all about intentionality, and you're going to love it. I have some great questions lined up for Justin about what he learned before his big trip, how he planned for it, and what he learned and wants to apply to his life now that he's on the other side of this trip. There's going to be a lot of great takeaways from this interview, so make sure that you're buckled up and relaxed so that you can enjoy this week's Money Talk. Real quick, in my story time segment here, I want to talk about FinCon. I learned a lot at FinCon, and I have a lot of great ideas brewing in my mind. There's something big that I'm working on that I may share here soon, but I'm really excited for the future of my content creation, financial planning, and a whole lot of great ideas that I learned at FinCon. And like I mentioned, it's going to be in Palm Springs, California next year. So if you're interested in creating financial content or a financial coaching business or meeting cool money nerds and all of the famous people that you hear on other personal finance podcasts, consider coming in 2026 to FinCon. And I also want to give a shout out to some listeners in some pretty cool areas that I've seen show up on the stats in the podcast. Orlando, Florida, and Melbourne, Australia are this week's shout outs. Thank you so much for listening. And if you're listening from somewhere cool or somewhere not cool, but you're listening, reach out and let me know where you're listening from. But let's get back into the episode with today's money buddy, Justin Taylor. Justin, also known as the Saving Sherpa and the co-host of the Financial Independence Show, grew up in Mississippi where money was tight and the opportunities were few. Inspired by his mom's determination to break the cycle of poverty, by age 31, he reached financial independence. Justin has shared his journey with complete transparency, showing every dollar that he spends and saved. One of the things I found fascinating was that his savings rate was so high, and we're going to touch on that in today's interview. His story is one of resilience, intentionality, and resourcefulness, and he believes money is not just about numbers. It is a tool to create freedom and purpose. This week's money talking points are: how can you be intentional with your money? 2, what other areas of your life are you intentional with? And 3, where can a lack of intentionality really impact your finances? With those money talking points in mind, let's get talking and welcome Justin to the show live from FinCon. Hello, Money Buddies. Thank you for listening to today's podcast episode. You'll notice it sounds a little bit different. I'm joined here with Justin Taylor live at FinCon. We're talking about intentionality today. This is going to be a fun conversation. It's been honestly like a year or two since I've done a live episode. These are always fun, a little bit different. We can kind of go back and forth in person instead of over a video stream. So Justin, thank you so much for coming on.
Appreciate you for having me on.
I'm excited. I've never met you, so this will be a fun first conversation for us as well. Could you maybe just give a quick introduction to some of the main things you do in the financial space?
Yeah, absolutely. Co-host a podcast called the Financial Independence Show. I've been blogging for a while over at SavingSherpa.com. But my backstory is kind of grew up in Mississippi, lower income, paid my own way through college. I was an Air Force officer, did corporate for a little bit, retired at 33 in November of 2023. And spent the first 6 months of this year traveling the world. And yeah, kind of just brute forced it, did the, high savings rate, didn't do like leverage through real estate or things like that. So I think a really repeatable kind of blueprint towards getting to early retirement.
Yeah, I was looking at some of your numbers on your blog. Your savings rate seemed a little bit crazy at points, so I don't know how you did that.
Yeah, I mean, it's that kind of lifestyle inflation, lifestyle creep, whatever you want to call it. When I was making $40,000 a year and the way I was living my life didn't change dramatically when I was making $200,000 a year. And so that allowed that savings rate to just keep climbing.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And we're going to talk about some of that intentionality that got you there. You mentioned you've been traveling for 6 months. I'm sure there's a lot that's got to go into that.
Yeah.
So we're going to dive into it with the money talking points to start out today. How do you feel that you can be intentional with your money? What's like maybe a main thing for you?
Yeah, so like, I've done a little bit of personal finance coaching on the side, and obviously tons of chats over the years with people about finance. And a common thing is people want you to tell them exactly what to spend money on. That's just not possible. You need to figure out what's important to you and be intentional about it. A little question I'll ask people a lot of times is I'll say, what'd you have to eat for lunch last Tuesday? Which is a super random sounding question. Most people have no idea. That's the point. You don't remember, so that's probably not what you should be spending money on. Something you can't remember a week after it happened, probably not the place to be spending a ton of your time or money on. But then you ask somebody about a concert they went to, their favorite concert, their favorite trip, their eyes light up. They start spewing off all these beautiful moments. And it's like, okay, that's what you spend your money on. So being intentional about things that have that lasting power and that bring you actual happiness, and then being ruthless with everything else.
Yeah, that's really a fantastic frame of reference. If you remember it, then it's probably worth spending money on again. If you don't remember it, let's not bother with it. And this intentionality really does extend beyond money. It's something that we need to apply to our finances and spend money on what we enjoy. But what are some other areas that you think this intentionality has helped you out?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I've gotten really into fitness and nutrition over the last 3 years. I've gotten the best shape of my life. At 35, 25-year-old me would not want to run up on 35-year-old me. Like I would smoke that guy. And so with that, there's so many parallels. I think that whether with nutrition and fitness and finance, there's just so many parallels between those. And I think that, with that, like being intentional, so if it helps you kind of make some analogies in your brain, like if you're struggling with finance, but maybe you're doing a little bit better on the fitness side, or at least maybe it makes more sense to you, for someone who's struggling to hit this weight target, if they are actually like thinking about everything that they're doing and they're actually keeping track of what they're eating, they will get those results. It's when you're just kind of trying to, like fly by the seat of your pants and it not be top of mind that you're not seeing the progress. So, it's like it's kind of like they say, like, you kind of measure what matters, being on top of it, being mindful of it. That's another place where intentionality has been big for me.
So it sounds to me like you can take what you've learned in one area, apply it to other areas. Because like maybe someone, they're not good with money right now, but that's something they want to be good with. Maybe they're good in the health space right now. That can be somewhere where they can take those intentionality pieces they've learned. Maybe they're really good at meal planning. Move that over to budgeting. And that could be a direct correlation there. How do you feel like this lack of intentionality, especially with finances, if we are just spending whatever we want on that thing we don't remember last Tuesday, how does that lack of intentionality really impact us?
Yeah, I will always say that the big categories like your housing, your car, your food, that sort of thing is still the most important. I'm not one of these that are like, okay, you should never go out for coffee, those small expenses. But much like with eating, when you're going by and you grab a snack and don't throw that in the calorie tracker, that is the thing keeping you off track. The same thing with, the random Amazon purchases that are showing up on your doorstep. Like when you ask someone what their monthly spending is, a lot of times they're taking a stab at it. They're very inaccurate based on when I've actually worked with clients. A lot of times that comes down to that lack of intentionality, that lack of really paying attention to the full spectrum. Maybe they've got a good idea of what their mortgage is and what their car payment is, but they're completely forgetting about this $500 or $600 of random expenses coming every month on just that miscellaneous stuff, that because it's different every single month. It's not a reoccurring thing.
Yeah, that Amazon one hits close to home. My wife and I have had to put into place this Amazon cart day, where we won't look at the cart. Like if we want something, we have to put it in the cart. Every Friday is when we have to check on it and decide, we really don't actually need that, to avoid those random impulse purchases that you don't keep track of. So that's a key thing. If you're struggling listening and you're struggling purchasing on Amazon, find some level of intentionality and add one small piece to it. And I think that could be a huge shift for people, because then they start to rein that stuff in. They start to figure out those random categories that they aren't understanding. Because, everyone has a good idea. They know their mortgage payment's a certain amount, but you have no idea how much you're spending on those gas station candy bars, things like that. And those are death by 1,000 paper cuts kind of thing.
I've never seen anyone who, when you ask them to kind of give you a stab at what their expenses are and then you actually work it through with them, I've never seen anyone who guessed a higher number than reality. Everyone always guesses less. That's 100%.
Yeah, they want to make themselves think they're doing better. I have all the spreadsheets and stuff, and I still would probably guess less than we actually spend. Like, no matter how already into it you are with your money, you're still going to guess less. So you got to actually track it on top of things. But let's move into talking about your traveling and some of the things that you've been able to do through this intentionality, through that high savings rate. You mentioned you were living 6 months away from your normal living situation, how do you still maintain intentionality when so often we can get in that mindset of, oh, it's the vacation budget, or I get a free spending? How do you still stay intentional even when you're trying to do other things?
Yeah, there's a couple things there. Last year, we took a lot of trips. And even before that, we knew someday we were going to get to this point where we're going to be fully retired and traveling all the time. And so it made us think, okay, well, maybe we will purchase a home so that we can Airbnb it while we're not in it. And that will give us an income stream where we're not paying for two different places to live. We were very intentional about that. When we bought the house, it was purely with the intention of having something that we could flip on and off as an income stream versus like, okay, maybe we're locked into a year lease and then we leave it and then it's just sitting there empty. When we're booking places, we're very on top of thinking like, can we walk to a gym? Can we walk to a grocery store? Does this Airbnb have a kitchen? Does it come with a bicycle? Versus getting caught up in, oh man, look at this trendy bedroom and this fancy accent wall and things that don't actually add anything to it. I always joke about, name your place, like the Caribbean, you're going to Mexico, whatever it is. You don't go there to stay in this really fancy place. Your house is probably already nice enough. You go there for the beach or whatever it is. Prioritize what you're going to see and not prioritize, don't spend all your budget on the things that are just like keeping you inside and keeping you in that little bubble. Like save that big chunk of money to really experience the location you're going to, not just recreate what you already have at home.
Yeah, that Airbnb you're renting in the Caribbean might have a really nice fireplace, but who cares because you're going to sit on the beach the whole time.
Yeah.
So that's honestly like create your list. Create those things that you say, it's got to have this, this, and this. And then just, like you said, ruthlessly eliminate anything else and be sure to check it against those lists. How do you prepare your finances to do something like this? You were already intentional going into it, obviously, but that's a huge shift to do money where you're not living in a normal situation. Maybe you don't have regular expenses like you were used to. How do you prepare for that?
The awesome thing about this trip was that financially preparing for it was no problem at all because we saved money going on this trip. It would have cost us more just locking ourselves in our home in Austin, Texas, than it was spending 6 months across Southeast Asia and Europe. We weren't only in cheap locations. And that is because of that intentionality beforehand of we got our house where we could rent it out. It earned almost exactly what we spent overall. And remember, when you're planning a trip like this, you're budgeting for groceries and entertainment. Those expenses exist if you don't travel as well. So It's not like you got to double count yourself there. Also things like, hey, you're going to be able to put your car in storage mode for insurance purposes. You can cancel some gym memberships. Those Amazon packages that are racking up expenses.
They stop showing up.
When you're traveling the world in a 30-liter backpack and you're in a different city every week, you're not ordering stuff off Amazon. I had one $6 purchase online for 6 months.
Wow, that's unheard of.
So actually, it wasn't bad at all. And there was a little bit of like, hey, let's counterbalance Europe with Asia because it's different price points and make that affordable. And sometimes we dialed up the bouginess in certain areas where we felt like it would actually be worth it. And then other areas where we knew we were going to be out and about constantly and where the amenities wouldn't make a difference. Like we dialed down the cost to average things out. Even little things like our house, we joined this network where it's kind of like a house swapping network. And we were able to stay in Rome, in Amsterdam, and in Lucerne, 3 of the most expensive places we went, for nothing more than a cleaning fee. And we're getting to stay in like a nice home, not like a tiny little hotel room.
Yeah, and I'm sure things can go wrong, and that intentionality helps you out there. Maybe let's share just a quick story of this big old trip obviously can't go perfectly. How did things go wrong? How do you handle that?
Yeah, 2 funny little quick stories. One, it started almost immediately. Like the first country we're trying to get into the Philippines, apparently there was this visa type form that we, through all our searching, never came across. We'd been in the airport for like 8 hours. And then 10 minutes before the flight's supposed to leave, they're like, hey, you got to show us the form. And we're like, I don't know what you're talking about. So we're sitting there trying to pacify them, show them something to let us on the plane. I actually didn't even have the correct stuff back from them yet and signed a piece of paper saying, I accept the risk of the Philippines not letting me in the country. And I was able to get it done on the flight.
Oh, man.
And so that kicked us. That was right out of the gate. And then deeper in the trip, Leslie got her bag stolen in Florence, Italy, which included her phone and her wallet. And so she was without a phone for several weeks. And, that just logistically causes a lot of problems.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot of headaches. But I think when you have an element of intentionality beforehand, those sort of things aren't as big of a deal. Because if you just went on this trip to say, oh, we're just going to go travel the world and be crazy for 6 months, that sort of thing would derail your whole plan. So you kind of have this almost of a backstop of that safety net of intentionality and taking some precautions that probably made it a little less stressful than it would have been just for some random tourists.
Yeah.
So you were a little bit more prepared there. But what do you feel was the biggest takeaway for your finances? You mentioned that it barely cost you more than your Airbnb, so some planning ahead of time was a huge deal. What's the biggest takeaway for you?
Honestly, the biggest takeaway for me is someone who is, being frugal comes pretty natural. I grew up fairly poor, so I'm used to being efficient. My lesson that I take away is more on the other end, pushing me to spend a little more. When we were in Asia, you get used to a $7 massage, and then when you see the $11 massage, you're like, I don't know, that's maybe a little too expensive. And then when you zoom back on it and are rational, you're like, that's ridiculous. Like, that's still an incredible deal and would have made my life a little happier. So that's probably my biggest takeaway was, don't be too restrictive. I don't think enough people talk about is like, there's plenty of people out there struggling to stop overspending, but there's also a big camp of us that struggle to spend.
Yeah, so I guess you're getting at kind of the idea of if you remember it from last Tuesday, then maybe those are the things you'd spend on. Is that what you'd say there?
Yeah, it was like that was something I should have pulled the trigger on. That is something that would have been a great experience, that would have made my life better, and it wouldn't have changed anything. If our average spending was $55 a day and it goes to $55.10 a day, like who cares?
Yeah. Do you think that's something, I guess that goes in the route of being intentional with our spending versus spending on whatever. Do you think people would do better overall if they were spending, like if they just took all their spending and spent the same amount, but on those things that they enjoyed? Do you think that money would go further? How do you think that would help people out?
Yeah, I definitely think they would enjoy it more. I mean, if you were spending the exact same amount, but just spending it in different places, like obviously at the end of the day, financially, you're kind of in the same boat, but you'd be so much happier, and you'd probably also realize what things actually were important to you, and you could also start to see, hey, this is the minimum viable product as far as how much spending I've got to have. So like maybe right now you're thinking, I can't retire at this age because I need this much money. Not just like I want this much money, but like need this much money. Once you start to reprioritize and you're spending it on the things that are really important to you and cutting out that other stuff, you can look at that budget, and the portion of it that is that true requirement, like that true need, is much smaller than you think. A bigger portion of it is more of just like that kind of enjoyment thing, which obviously you don't want to cut, but you can know in the back of your head and feel a little safer saying, if I have to, I can.
Yeah. And being able to cut back where you need to is a big deal, because sometimes you just need to take that step and then you're back on the right path. How have you seen, you've mentioned you've done some coaching, or you have a lot of blogs out there and podcasts. How have you seen this impact other people in their lives? How do you think someone who's just listening to us today could take what we're talking about and have it really impact them?
Honestly, that's one of the coolest things. So rewarding. We've gotten emails from people from so many different countries telling us that it gave them the confidence to walk away from a job they hated, or to finally take that next step in the life they really wanted to live. There was a couple that I worked with that were actually doing phenomenal. They just needed an objective outside look to help them take it from being like this idea that they had that they weren't 100% sure about, to having that full confidence to take the leap. And now they're flying all over Alaska, living their best life. It's really cool to see people get that confidence and take hold of the life they really want to live. And so, yeah, I mean, that's the biggest takeaway, is it giving people confidence and a roadmap and reassurance that everything's going to be all right. I forget who originally said it, but they said the worst case scenario is everyone else's everyday scenario. Okay, so you go back to work. If you retired a little too early, or you found out like, hey, retirement's not for me, okay, go back to work, you know?
Yeah, your worst case scenario is someone else's 9-to-5,
yeah,
like grueling corporate job kind of thing. So like there's always going to be some sort of fallback plan, and if you're being intentional, you're going to be able to figure out a different way to make it work if you need to change stuff up. Maybe like you said, retirement's not quite for you. So I know a previous podcast guest, we just had Jillian Johnsrud on the show talking about mini retirements. So maybe that's your next approach. You get a job for a few years, then retire, get a job for a few years, and it can be a cycle like that. I think that's one of the most fun things about all the people here, is there's so many different ideas all these people are sharing. There's CoastFi, there's Proper Fire, there's all sorts of different things that you can do with your money, and you can live your life however you want to. Back to your trip real quick. We talked about the financial implications. You were able to pay for it from your Airbnb with some planning ahead of time. What's the overall life thing that you take away from that towards your just own life after spending that long away?
Yeah, honestly, just an appreciation for everything that I have and that we have here in the United States. There's plenty of things for lots of people to complain about. And yeah, the world's not perfect. The country's not perfect. But at the end of the day, there's so many people around the world who would swap places with us. The amount of opportunity and variety we have here, being less pessimistic, more optimistic, more glass half full, stop dwelling on the negatives of life and be, grateful for what you have, and also just see, like, when you see a little kid in Vietnam who's running around who has nothing, but they've got a huge smile on their face, you start to realize that there's other things that are so much more important than these material things that we have. And so, yeah, and just the variety and opportunity in the United States is unparalleled.
That's an awesome note to leave it on. We'll head towards wrapping up this episode. I got 2 final questions that I ask every guest. The first one will be, how can people find you? To give you a second to think about the last question, it's going to be, what do you wish you knew sooner about this intentionality piece? Like, before you got going with all this, when you were just getting started, if you were like, yeah, I want to be more intentional about my life, what would you want to apply now? But first, let's talk about, where can people find you?
I blog over at Saving Sherpa. We have a podcast called The Financial Independence Show, myself and Cody Berman. You can find that anywhere, like Spotify, etc. And then if you want to really dive into the trip that we went on, that 6-month trip, you can check that out over at Substack at Life Well Worth It. As far as what I wish I would have known earlier as far as intentionality goes is, I think it's more about making things super tangible, making a real plan with actual constraints and tracking yourself, avoiding being too notional in this 10,000-foot view. Sure, there's always a part of that in any planning process, pushing yourself to really reverse engineer the life you want to have to a point of detail that you can kind of see if you're making progress.
Yeah, tracking is a huge piece in there for me. That's one of the things that I love. I got all the spreadsheets and everything set up. I really hope all of you listening were able to take something away from this great conversation. Justin, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me, man.
I hope you enjoyed that interview. I know I enjoyed recording with Justin. It was our first time meeting, so it was really fun to get to record a podcast interview. FinCon is so much fun, and it's a great way to meet so many other money nerds, have fun podcast interviews, and create great content. Here's some things that I learned at FinCon that I want to talk about. You need to be willing to go to in-person events, whether it's for your job and career that you are in for networking, or if it's to go to your local Choosify meetup groups or start one. In-person groups and real group meetings can be super powerful. The other thing that I learned is that whatever you want to try in the content creation space, you can make it work. There was a session at FinCon about everything that you could think of. If you want to do YouTube, do it. If you want to do short form TikTok, Reel, or YouTube short type of videos, do it. If you want to create something that's audio only because you just don't want to deal with the video setup, do it. If you do not want to create your own content, but you want to coach and build a business around it, do it. Everything works. All the various presenters showed some way to make all these different ideas work and to make money doing all these different things. So if you're thinking about any sort of idea that I've mentioned in the last 30 seconds or whatever about YouTube, TikTok, or whatever it may be, consider going next year to FinCon if you want to create some content, start a business, or meet all your favorite money nerds in one place. And I have some fun things that I'm working on in the background that I can't wait to share with you one day very soon. But now, as for intentionality with the podcast episode and what we really talked about today, my wife and I, we love to practice this. We make it a focal point of everything we do. We're considering selling our car and going down to one car. Now, you may say, well, Skylar, don't you work at home? Why do you have more than one car? The key thing is my wife's old car is a 2001 Toyota Corolla that is still running well, gets us around town well. So we're considering selling our main car because I did some great math on it and realized that it may be cheaper for us to rent a car when we truly need one for more long distance trips that we wouldn't trust this 2001 car with. It may be cheaper, and so that's where we're trying to figure things out. What an exciting time. It's all about trying new things and being intentional with what you want to do with your money. There's so many great decisions out there that you could make. Maybe you need to go down to be a one-car family. Maybe you need to move. Maybe you need to sell the house that you own and rent. There are so many great decisions, and when we're intentional with our money, that's when we can truly make great strides and progress in the right direction. And I know this was a shorter episode today. I really hope you enjoyed it. That's a wrap on today's journey through intentional living and financial stories. We kicked it off with diving into Justin's 6-month vacation because who doesn't want to trade in their cubicle for a chair on the beach, right? We learned that intentionality isn't just about budgeting. You can be intentional in so many different areas, whether it's downsizing to one car, finally starting that YouTube channel you want to make, or whatever you are thinking about doing, if you're intentional and you make key choices, make sure they align with your goals and you'll be set. A lack of intentionality in your finances can sneak up on you so quickly, and then all of a sudden you have way too many Amazon packages on your front door. Most Americans admit that they don't have a solid budget, so let's take a page from Justin's book today and start being deliberate and intentional with our dollars as we make choices that align with our goals. But thank you for tuning in, Money Buddies. The best way to stay up to date and connected with all things Money Talk is to subscribe to the podcast and sign up for my email list over at moneytalk.show. Submit your name and email right there on the homepage. And then you can use the contact page on the website to send me any questions you might have. If you're looking to get started with budgeting, consider my budget coach. I'm a partner on their platform and you can work directly with me as your financial coach. I'd love to work with you over there. The link is in the show notes. And remember, the best way to learn from today's episode is to go out and have a money talk about today's topic with a fellow money buddy. And thank you for listening to this week's episode of Money Talk. I'm your host, Skylar Fleming. Have a great week.
Thank you for listening to Money Talk. This show is provided for informational and entertainment purposes and may not be specific to your unique situation. Please be sure to do additional research before making any financial decisions.